On behalf of the Patient Safety Authority, I would like to welcome you to this webinar titled Happy for the Frazzled in Healthcare, Healthcare Applied Positive Psychology Yearnings for the Functional Real Advocates with Zeal and Zest for Leadership, but Exhausted and Discouraged Health Persons. Ooh, that's a lot to say. My name is Kelly Gibson, and I will be your moderator for the program. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for the webinar. Diane Frndak and Holly Hampe are both assistant professors of health service administration leadership at Robert Morris University. Diane has over 30 years of healthcare experience and served as a vice president of organizational excellence and vice president of safety and quality at a health system level. Holly has over 30 years of healthcare experience with an extensive background in patient safety, quality, risk management, and regulatory affairs. She served as the Vice President and Chief Quality Officer for a community hospital. She currently holds membership on a Health System Board Quality and Safety Committee and Patient Safety Committee, as well as Long-Term Care Advisory Board. Diane and Holly, I will now turn the program over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kelly. Diane and I are very happy to be with you today. And it's nice to see so many familiar faces that are on the participant list. And, you know, over 30 years with Diane, over 30 years with Holly, that means that we've been in healthcare a long time and we've got great networks. And we thank you very much for participating in the program. But as you can see, the Happy and Frazzled, the acronym for each, and, you know, functioning real advocates for zeal and zest for leadership, but exhausted and discouraged. That's the frazzled part of healthcare person. And you look at this individual and you can see it's a little dated because there is a cap on the nurse. And, you know, as a nurse myself, can you remember when you put smelling salts in your cap to have it just in the event that you needed it? So we're always prepared. We're always ready to react. And, you know, we are there, you know, be it the nurse, be it the infection preventionist, be it the administrator, be it the frontline nurse, we are always there. And you can look at this and see, you know, we've got pens and we've got, you know, the stethoscope and we got the pen light. We're always ready for that next adventure. And, you know, sometimes we take our own energy to expend upon other people because that is what we do. And, if we go to the next slide, we can see that we are definitely we're getting frazzled, particularly with the COVID, with the opportunities that we've had over the last 3 months. Those that are in the front lines have really taken that frazzle to the next degree. At the end of the session, these are the objectives for this session, and you're going to be able to see 3 positive psychology interventions. You're going to be looking at self-care action plans and also be able to measure your own happiness and well-being and self-diagnose, and then you'll be able to determine what tools you will need. If you look at the next slide, it's, you know, the percentage of inpatient nurses that have a high level of emotional exhaustion. 43% of the inpatient nurses have a high level of exhaustion. And, you know, burnout can be described in 3 levels. You know, exhaustion is definitely the first level of burnout, where you feel as though you're exhausted, you're depleted. As I said in the previous slide, nurses and healthcare professionals tend to take their own energy and expend it upon others. And that's where you get to exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted, and you lose your energy. Cynicism, looking at things negatively. When you get burned out, sometimes the only way you can look at it is from a negative perspective. And you just, you know, people that work around you, you get very annoyed by them. And the last one, efficiency. Being able to, you know, you have a diminished personal accomplishments, you expended all your energy and you have nothing for yourself. And that's burnout. And, you know, we have seen a lot of burnout articles that came out from people that are trying to do it all. And this COVID-19, the pandemic has certainly increased our exhaustion level. So if we go to the next slide, you know, looking at we're going to do a poll and we're going to determine burnout and pre-power. And I'm going to pass it to Diane to explain those polls that we're going to be doing.
All right. This is a one question, kind of a self-definition of burnout. And so you can pick your one answer that you think is most appropriate for you. And after we have everybody participate, looks like we are starting to get some votes in, we'll show everyone kind of where we are at this point as a community. All right, let's end the polling and share the results.
Look at the results. 53% of you, occasionally I'm under stress and I don't always have as much energy. The next one, I'm 22%, I'm definitely burned out and have one or more symptoms of burnout. Then we got 11% that experience burnout, won't go away, feeling frustrated. 9% enjoy your work and have no symptoms of burnout. And then 7% are completely burned out. So, I think that our presentation will be able to affect all of the levels of burnout. Then we have another poll too, correct, Diane, if you can send that other poll out?
Yep. This is kind of your pre-power poll. So we're going to do this pre, and then at the end, we're going to kind of see if your energy increases. So go ahead and vote kind of what your pre-power is. We're already faster than we were. We're already exceeding. All right, another 10 seconds. We're at 65% this time. All right, so here's the results.
40% of you somewhat energized. And, I was just thinking if we did this on a Monday or a Friday, whether the results would be different being it on Tuesday. So 40% somewhat energized, 31% somewhat low energy. So we're kind of like, 50-50 somewhat. And then 27 of you are neutral, 2% both ways, very high and very low. So thank you very much for participating in the poll. So if we go to the next slide, many times we start out our careers thinking that we are going to be able to solve the world's problems. As Kelly mentioned, Diane and I are both professors at Robert Morris University, and we have the opportunity and the honor to work with students in the undergraduate and graduate, and their eyes are wide open to opportunities in their career. They are ready to go out there and solve things that are going on. Thinking back when you started your career, it's like, I am going to save the world. I am going to make it a better place. And then, we look at the opportunities and the great opportunities that we have in our career, and then COVID happens, and then opportunities happen, and then we have Groundhog Day. And the Groundhog Day syndrome. Do you ever feel like it was Groundhog Day? And many people that I've spoken to, I'm on the board at Butler, and it was like Groundhog Day. Every day was the same. Excited about different problems, and you're really passionate, making plans to solve those big problems that are out there. Remember the movie Groundhog Day, waking up, starting to collect data. You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it a better place, and I'm going to solve the big problems. I'm going to solve world hunger. And then you spend hours in meetings, and you have a moderate passion. You start reporting the data, and your day becomes filled with meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And then you continue to spend more hours in meetings, and you get some passion, but your passion's starting to go down. You're still collecting the data, you're still collecting the reporting, you're still, but now you're hitting that snooze button in the morning because you're like, I spend too much hours in meetings, I'm less passionate, I don't want to go to work. I hit the snooze button twice now. and I don't want to be there. I'm dragging out of bed and I can't get there. I'm exhausted. I'm trying to make a difference, but I see all these problems in front of me and I can't do anything about them. And, then I crawl out of bed super late. I'm exhausted trying to make a difference, and I'm discouraged by all the problems. And I just don't have enough energy. And I'm get up late. Now I'm rushing to work. I'm exhausted. I get home late. I'm not good to anybody. And I repeat this 200 days per the year times 5 years, times 10 years, times 15 years, times 20 years, times 30 years. And then we've got COVID. And COVID has made a different world out there. We stay up late, we work super hard, we're trying to support people, we're sad, we're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, we're scared, we're surprised, we're frustrated, we're stretched thin, we're edgy, we're anxious, we're fearful, and we're miserable. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, you're not like this, and you'll find the tools that you need to work through this. So we have a poll now on feelings. How do you feel right now? And mark all the feelings that you have. As we've mentioned, stressed, enthusiastic, worried, content, apathetic, discouraged, calm, focused, anxious, or hopeful. And submit those results.
All right, let's end our polling and share the results.
Results are, now 47% of you are stressed. And it looks like 37% worried, 35% calm, 27% focused, 29% anxious. So it looks like, we've got some work to do. We've got the stress part of it. And I think that every person that we've talked to in healthcare has been stressed by something, trying to balance life in home, at work. And so we are, hopefully you'll be able to take some tools here that you can do for yourself as well as your colleagues. And
well, Holly, the number one answer though was 49% hopeful, which is right at the very bottom. So that's optimistic.
Oh, I'm sorry, mine didn't go down that far, but it is 49% hopeful, which is
that's number one.
Number one. So we've got, opposite ends of the polls here. So hopeful is a good place to be. Hopeful is a good place to continue. So if we look at this next picture, and I want you to say, are you on the left of the picture or the right of the picture? Are you with all of the weeds and all of the dried grass, or the tapestry that's on the right-hand side? And if you think of a tapestry, or you think of needlepoint, and you think of the one side of is just like this picture, very colorful, very perfect. And then if you look under the underside of it, you'll see all the knots and all the strings that are with that. So, which side are you on the left or on the right? Languishing or flourishing? So it sounded like, 49% of the are flourishing in that hopeful stage. So in looking at your mood meter, where do you, if you look at the y-axis, you have the energy levels, and you can see where it goes from despair to engaged and everywhere in between. And then on the x-axis, you have the pleasantness. Are you in the despair or are you in the serene? And so you can actually look to see where you are on the meter to see what level of your energy is and what level of your pleasantness is. It'd be also a good thing to have your co-workers or your family do it for you too. See where they see you at. Sometimes we see ourselves in different places, so it's always good to have self-reflection and outside reflection. So if you look at this, you can see the majority of us are in the functional area where we are going from the lower left-hand corner up to the ideal, where we're flourishing, we're thriving, we're not languishing. And you can see where 17% of this of a poll is at flourishing and thriving, and 10 to 15% under languishing. So you've got the 60% in between that are somewhere in the functional area. So it's zest, hope, gratitude, love, and curiosity, which are the 5 strengths of life satisfaction. So we want to give you permission, Diane and I want to give you permission to rest, to absorb the information, to sit back. This is your time for you. Self-care is important. And we've found that, healthcare workers don't typically do self-care. And, this is for you to, be able to identify where you are, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. So you need to have an internal evaluation. So I'm going to hand it over to Diane now to talk about the positive psychology and to the journey of flourishing in the science of flourishing.
Thanks, Holly. Well, I've been interested in kind of the science of flourishing or applied positive psychology for about 5 years, and it's really contributed so much to my own personal life. But so I want to share some of the ideas, and I hope that we can kind of inspire you to focus on some of your own personal well-being, thriving, flourishing. And realize this is not pop psychology. There's actually science behind this. And there's some really very robust research that supports that if you do some of the positive psychology interventions, you will actually decrease depression, anxiety, and increase and go towards that thriving or flourishing. So really, positive psychology was born from a traditional psychologist who said, a lot of times what we're trying to do is take people out of that more languishing and take them into the functioning area. But what would be the science that would take people from the functioning towards the flourishing or the thriving aspect? And so what we really wanted to create today was really a heart-centered journey. Really, this is something that you do work inside of yourself, and then it radiates out from inside of your heart. So it's a heart-centered journey. And we wanted to create kind of a real-time community of like-minded people. And so to do that, we've embedded about 3 different breakout groups that we would like to invite you to participate in. You will be assigned kind of randomly, and they'll be really quick. So you really need to use your time wisely within the groups. So the first one is kind of more of a smile exercise. So introduce yourself to the people in your breakout group with a great big smile. Use positive words to be able to introduce yourself. And you only have 2 minutes, and I'm going to make the breakout groups of about 12 breakout groups. So that should be pretty good to have a small enough group that you'll have the time to do it. And it'll automatically bring you back into the main session at the end of the time. So I don't have any clue of who you'll be with, but it'll be fun to meet some new friends and greet each other and introduce. And you'll come back into these breakout groups for some additional discussion. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I think we have pretty much everyone back. So please enter into the chat room if you have any comments or you want to share what that experience was like. Did you meet any new people? Do you feel, that positive energy with each other? We're going to do the next breakout session. I'll take you right back into it. This is called Gratitude Ping Pong. And you have a few more than 2 people, but if you picture that, I think you have about 5, but you're ping-ponging back and forth some gratitude. And we'll talk a little bit about the science behind this whenever we're finished with it. But we'll have about 3 minutes to go around your group and share one thing that you're thankful for right now. And just go as fast as possible to the next person, as quick as you can for the entire time. All right, so one of the exercises you just did was called Gratitude Ping Pong, where you really are focusing on what you're thankful for or what you're grateful for. One exercise that is evidence-based that's kind of similar to this is writing down 3 good things in your life right now. People recommend that you do that in the evening right before you go to bed because it might help your sleeping pattern. And also it potentially, if you do it for 2 weeks, has been shown by research to improve your kind of depression, those depression feelings for about 6 months afterwards. So it's a pretty powerful exercise. It's a pretty simple exercise. It's one of the positive psychology interventions that you can very easily do. But the next thing I want to introduce you to is the evidence or the science behind the positive psychology. And I mentioned that Martin Seligman, who is a positive psychology researcher, focused on positive psychology when he was became president of his professional association. He really wanted to introduce some new ideas, and so he started to study it, and it's a relatively new area of psychology, because as I mentioned, a lot of people focus on the negative side, what's wrong with people, and positive psychology focuses on what's right with people and how we can go towards more thriving or flourishing. And the research actually developed that there is a model called the PERMA model, P-E-R-M-A model. And then a good friend of mine actually did some additional research, and she added a V, which stands for vitality. Some of the Australian researchers, you'll actually see an H for health, but the meaning is kind of the same, V or H. But there's these 6 elements of basically positive psychology, and the more of these elements that you have, the more likely you will actually go towards that thriving or flourishing. So the first one is positive emotion or positivity, where you really try to learn how to be optimistic and look at things from a positive perspective. The second one is engagement, where we focus on things we really care about and enjoy, and being present, some concepts of flow, concepts of mindfulness. Those are all engagement concepts. This third one is relationships. Every researcher has found that there's a real need for connection, and that when we are interacting with positive people in our lives, we're more likely to be positive. And then meaning, and a lot of times in healthcare, we don't have as much of an issue of meaning because we went into it because we cared about people, but we can lose that. And we know that based on some of the research about compassion fatigue. So we really need to sometimes reground ourselves and find purpose and meaning in our work and in our lives. And then the A stands for accomplishment. That's actually achieving things. I actually moved flow over to accomplishment for today's purpose, and I'll give you a little bit of intro to each one of these. And then the V would stand for vitality, and the V or health, the H would are not part of the original model, but again, many researchers have added them. So for positive emotions, one of the researchers that you may want to read about is Barbara Fredrickson, and I think she's from the University of North Carolina. These are the 10 positive emotions, and if you really think about these words, they're pretty precious. If you can really focus on getting this joy and gratitude and hope and pride and amusement, inspiration and awe and love in your life, that's a good thing. And we have a natural tendency because of our neuroscience to focus on the negative. It's part of our survival. But you have to take intentional steps to actually focus on positive emotions and build those into your life. For engagement, I'm just going to share the concept of mindfulness. I think we've been kind of saturated on mindfulness, but it can be meditation, but it can be more than that or different than that as well. It's really focusing in that present moment, and in some ways just being aware of what you're feeling, and being so aware that you don't judge it, you accept it. And I tell my father, tends to be a little bit negative, like they're little clouds that float away, those little feelings and thoughts that are negative, let them float away. And staying open-hearted and curious about your own sense of well-being and where you are. There's a really, really nice strengths instrument that you can find at viacharacter.org, and I put a list of references at the end of the presentation as well as the infographic. the VIA, which is originally stood for Values in Action, I think they're just using VIA now, they define 24 strengths, and you can do a free survey of your strengths and find your 5 top signature strengths. And another positive psychology intervention, or PPI as they call it, is to take either the first 5 or even the first few and use them in unique ways in the next week. And that has actually been demonstrated to lead you to a more positive mindset. So this is just a graphic of the various ones. You can find your own. You don't have to pay for any of the additional reports, but I think you'll find them interesting. And you can track them over time as well. So that can also be a lot of fun, because you can see how you may be developing some skills to develop new strengths. A lot of the positive psychology is focused on strengths versus really weaknesses. So the lower strengths are still strengths. They just aren't as high as your top 5 kind of signature strengths. And one of the researchers I love is Jane Dutton from the University of Michigan School of Business, and they really focus on positive organizational scholarship. And she talks about, in terms of relationships, we have those, what we call high quality connections, or HQCs. And we know them when we see them. We have them kind of periodically, but the goal would be for us to create them, to actually go out for the remainder of the day and try to create these little spark plug micro moments of love, as Barbara Fredrickson's name for them. But create these little short-term one-on-one interactions where you light someone up or you feel lit up. You walk away from it and you have better energy and vitality and zest, and you feel really known by that other person, that you really feel like they paid attention and were there, and they respect you. They have positive regard, and they're, again, micro moments of love is another name for high quality connections. Joy and meaning is also something that we know from patient safety research that is important to our work to create joy, meaning, and a safer healthcare. And the Japanese have this concept called ikigai, which is you take your passions and your mission, your purpose, or your profession, your purpose, and you have something that is the reason you get up in the morning. And it's the combination of all of those, that sweet spot right in the middle, that actually gives you that sense of ikigai. The researcher who's written about flow, it's an excellent book. It's pretty dense if you're interested in it. But there's times when we get so involved in a task that we're so energized that we have such a sense of flow. There's a harmony as we're moving forward. And where we a lot of times are stretched beyond what we think we can even do, but so we're challenged, but we have the abilities to rise up. And I love the concept of flow and highly recommend you investigate that. But I kind of put it under achievement for today. And then lastly, the V, the vitality, it's taking care of your physical body and your stress. So it's exercise and nutrition and relaxation, stress management, all of those aspects are part of the V, the vitality. And the goal is for self-care to not think that you need to put oxygen on other people first, but you do what the airlines suggest, you put the oxygen on yourself. This breakout group will be from these slides. So if we have kind of 2 ends, and those of you who know me, I love this diagram because it kind of reminds me of the Toyota production system concepts, where you have your ideal up here and then your current condition down here. Now your current condition could be anywhere along this line, but if we are down in this end where we're kind of cynical and have physical or emotional exhaustion, maybe shame, apathy, anger, and we know based on the national research that for healthcare workers, about 43 to 54% are down in this area. But then we have the possibility of having our best self, or flourishing, and having those positive emotions of joy and serenity and hope and pride and love. So the key question here is, where are you? this is something you can share with your group if you feel comfortable. But I think a more important question is, what direction are you going? So I'm going to try to add a little annotation on the fly here. You know, are you crawling down this way and not even realizing it? Or are you leaping down this way? Like, you know, things are getting worse and worse and worse. Or what we call that is really a vicious cycle, right? It gets worse and worse and worse and worse here. Or are you making baby steps kind of coming up this direction? Or can you make some big leaps coming up this direction? Hold on a second. And can you create a virtuous cycle, right? So you're growing and learning and getting better and better, and you're making progress towards your best self or your flourishing. So those are things for you to be thinking about as you're talking with the next group. And here's a list of positive psychology interventions. You know, we've talked about gratitude, savoring as part of kind of engagement. That's relationships, kindness, having achievements and setting goals. You know, so here's just a list of some positive psychology interventions that you could take this list and do a self-assessment and start to use these pretty much immediately. So we're going to go back into our breakout groups, and I'm going to try to keep you in the same groups, but if not, just introduce yourself to the people in your group and have fun. And we'll do this one for a little bit longer, let's say about 5 minutes, and then we have a few just remaining. But actually, well, let's make it 3 minutes for this one too. So we have 3, 9, 5. Okay, and so enjoy, and you'll be back together shortly. All right, so we have a few people that aren't assigned, so we'll go ahead and have a breakout group. So are you guys feeling like you're going in the direction of flourishing or the direction of more burnout or languishing at this point?
I'm probably more towards the burnout and languishing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I work in a nursing home.
Uh-huh.
So we're very stressed here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've had no cases, but it's only by the grace of God, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody's at risk. Are there steps, Angela, that you've thought about, particularly when you look at some of those positive psychology interventions that you might be able to try?
I have strategies for coping. Goal setting and meetings don't work because at any time my day changes. So I've done a few random acts of kindness.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be very optimistic in my thinking, but that's a little rough sometimes too.
Yeah. How about some others? Just unmute yourself if you just have your mic. Go ahead, Jacqueline, just unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
You know, I think I work for a hospice, but I think burnout is become a huge piece of what we deal with. These positive psychology interventions and bring it into our day, it can definitely help because as caregivers, we have to care for people. So we have to be, you know, the best we can possibly be. So I find that if I, you know, take a gratitude, even just expressing gratitude, everything can definitely be helpful. And finding that me time every day, even if it's a few minutes a day.
Mm-hmm. Well, others will be joining us in about 8 seconds, so everybody's going to come back together. That's Jacqueline, you're exactly right. Showing gratitude is really, again, evidence-based. It's not just you know, pop psychology. It's evidence-based that actually can lead to good things. All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue on our journey here. So we created an infographic for you that would be like a 2-page, if you copy on both sides, the ability to have some of the key concepts and use it as a little worksheet for yourself. So you can use that, and you can start to implement those positive, at least 3 of them immediately. But there's also a desire for you to take some longer care, self-care action plans. And so I gave you some templates for those. I'll just show them to you here in a minute. And also the ability for you to measure your happiness or your well-being, because you're able to periodically do just a check-in with yourself. So here's a picture of the infographic. We're going to do a post-power, but I'm curious if what your pre-power is, what your post-power is. You can enter those. This is called a wheel of life. It allows you to do a little bit of a balanced approach, and you put where you are and then rate where you want to go and do them in 2 different colors. This is the PERMA model and the little psychology interventions. This is a little diagram that gives you some questions for reflection that would be very comprehensive using the PERMA-V model. And then you can do your interventions, your positive psychology interventions and self-care plan from this document. And then here's the measures and resources. And these positive, I tried to give you the best ones, but there's also some others in the end of your other presentation, but this is kind of that short version. So one thing that Holly and I were talking about is, what do you need? And really, is there, any desire to continue to have a discussion about this or to share some additional thoughts along the way. So we wanted to do a little bit of a post-power poll to see whether you had any more energy after the session. And be honest, we know that these sessions don't lead you to a magic improvements, but they sometimes can give you some more tools and more skills and give you some sense of what the science is out there around some of these topics. So we'll go 10 more seconds or so and take a look at this one. Well, it looks like we have 67% people are somewhat energized. So maybe we do have, oops, I didn't share. So maybe we do have some improvement. I'll have to look back at what the other one was. But the challenge is to sustain that, right? So after you come back from a conference, a lot of times you're so positive and you're so energetic, but you're not sure what to do. And so one last poll, then we'll just open up for questions, is, what do you need? And this is more just for you to reflect, to start that self-care plan. What is it that you need to be able to move towards that flourishing? And again, you can choose multiple ones. It doesn't have to be one. So people, mainly 63% said implementation of the positive psychology of those PPIs. There's a whole list of positive psychology interventions. I gave you kind of a mini list. But if you're interested in more, some of the references I gave you, the first one, the positive psychology, they have lists of a lot of the different interventions. So feel free. And I'll turn it back over to Kelly to kind of finish up.
Well, thank you, Diane and Holly. This concludes the slide presentation of our program. Now we would like to begin the question and answer. With everything that is going on and so many needs of others that, we're focused in healthcare on treating other people, we don't have time a lot of times to think about ourselves. So what can we do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And very frequently, again, it's like, how do you get started? Because you don't have time to actually get started. And unfortunately, unless you actually make the time, because this is a heart-centered journey, you really have to kind of pause. I participate in a lot of kind of well-being webinars, and I participated in one last week, and I thought it was just priceless. So let me share these thoughts with you. He referenced Mother Teresa, who was working in India where there was extreme poverty and just an enormous amount of work that needed to be accomplished, right? And he said that even with Mother Teresa, she practiced every day going to prayer and having a devotional for 30 minutes, even in the midst of not being able, to help people. Having solitude, deep reflection is necessary. It's kind of a important aspect of this. And the other thing I thought was interesting, it said, he said that you have a core and you define your core and your vision of that best self, that flourishing, but you're frequently recalibrating from the deep peace and the core of nurturing yourself. And so we usually like think of like it's out, 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 give, give, give. And I had on the slide, your happiness is service to others. It's an important part. But you almost need to have a 5 to 20-second retreat with yourself periodically through the day for rejuvenation, affirmation, visualization, prayer, and make that muscle inside where you find the sweetness. And then from that, take it to the outer chaos. And this was a phrase that I thought was really cool. Small happy moments reinforce happiness. A little bit of beauty goes a long way. So creating that is kind of, I think, one of the things that you can do. It's priceless, it's free, and you don't need that much time.
And you got to start, you got to take the first step to get to the 10th step. So it's like, you know, start out slow. If you don't have time, you know, think of one thing and then 2 things and then add to it. And, you know, then you get to the place that you want to be.
Yeah, I do have a few more questions. What is the best resource you have found to deal with burnout?
Well, the National Academy of Medicine has some wonderful resources, and I have that on the infographic, so you can link there. It's actually where you can find a lot of the measurement. So if you're managing a team and you want to, you know, just do kind of a and again, make sure that you're covering that with your organization leadership, but just a little bit of, you know, some pre-exercises or, you know, some resources on what the best evidence is, the current statistics. They have PowerPoints, they have art that really can be inspiring. So I think there's a lot of resources there. And then again, I kind of give you some retreat, kind of personal reflection retreat options with some extra resources. But I love the National Academy of Medicine. It's mainly focused on clinician, but all of us, I think it fits.
Thank you. I love this question because it does seem like some people tend to, and I think you touched a little bit on this earlier about naturally being some are optimistic while some are pessimistic. And so how is flourishing learnable?
Yeah. Excellent question. And Martin Seligman, who is the guru of positive psychology, kind of compared learned helplessness, which we all kind of know, you know, like learned helplessness, and learned optimism. And he actually believes that you can. He actually wrote a book, which is excellent, about learned optimism. But you can learn optimism. You can reframe, do a positive reframe from a negative to a positive, and it improves the quality of your life, just the quality of your life, but it improves your health. And yesterday I found an article, which can't really read, but if you have these kinds of thoughts regularly, it could lead to dementia later in life. They call them RMTs, repetitive negative thinking. And they link that to Alzheimer's and dementia. So there's many reasons to learn how to be optimistic because, you know, we're all little pebbles into a ripple in our lives, our personal lives, our professional lives. And so the more that we are a positive ripple, the better that we're actually creating that world we want to live in. We have a question from Ashley here. She said, as a new nurse, I struggle often feeling ineffective. I want to do so much and don't always have the confidence I need, which leads to stress. What positive strategies would you recommend? Feeling ineffective is, again, it's a feeling. And again, it's the actual source that I gave you, the positivepsychology.com, I think it's called. They actually have a lot of resources that you might find helpful. But really, you take those feelings and you try to be curious about what's happening with you feeling ineffective. Like, what is that telling you? Because feelings are really instruction manuals for us. And so with that, we can actually assess that. Confidence usually builds when you push out your comfort zone. So you have like a little comfort zone, then you expand your comfort zone. As you learn more, you build more confidence. And you have to kind of step out of your comfort zone to build that bigger circle. So I think kind of, again, having some realistic feedback and connecting with other people who are also probably feeling ineffective can really be helpful. So it's the basics that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Diane. And as we're at 1 o'clock right now, but I think in wrapping up and pulling this to a conclusion, walking away from this session today, this webinar, what would you tell people to do as a first step?
Set aside some time to be by yourself and reflect. And I like a cup of green tea, or some people like a glass of wine, a pretty place, going to nature, and really allowing yourself to kind of think about the concepts.
Taking a long walk would be a good thing.
Yeah, they call it, in Japanese, they have a thing called bathing in nature. And it's actually, again, evidence-based. Being in nature actually does improve your sense of well-being, thriving.
Well, I thank you, ladies. This is wonderful information, especially right now with everything that's going on. I think healthcare has been maxed out right now and a lot of stressors. And so I know in our group discussions, we talked about just going for walks and how therapeutic that can be, a little bit of meditation or yoga or something of that, and being out in nature, away from electronics, away from social media, just to be with yourself almost. So I think this was some great information. We are going to be ending. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. This concludes our webinar.